Hello and welcome to another Pi Crowdcast. I'm Rick Tarosi, co-founder and general manager of Pi, and I'll be your host. Our guest today is McKenna Dempsey, who's the co-founder and CEO of Kamber, an app designed to help teens manage their mental health. We'll talk with McKenna about how her own lived experience inspired Kamber, how times like this pandemic can be an additional stressor for teens and why they need those tools to manage their mental health. And finally, if you stick around until the end, we'll have a special request for parents of teens or mental health professionals that can really help propel Kamber forward. So stick around for that. If it's your first time here, make sure and subscribe so that you're in the loop on all of our content. And let's get into this conversation with McKenna.
So Kamber is a mental health platform for teens. We are focused on providing education, resources, tools, and exercises to equip teens with the tools that they need to embrace their complexity and live in the world with the mental health challenges that they take on every day. So my background is in anxiety and depression, experiencing it, not studying it. And so after years and years of dealing with that and a very enlightening conversation with my father, embracing the complex nature of who I am instead of believing that I'm crazy or broken, I wanted to start this platform. Mm-hmm. And being a teenager was hard. So
Yeah. Maybe take us through some of that experience, like that led you to this idea.
Yeah. So when I was a teenager, I lived with severe anxiety and depressive episodes. And when I was 17, 18, my parents got me into therapy. I was put on some medications, and I'm not against medications, but for me and the time that I was in, the medications that I was put on were not appropriate for my brain. So I had a bit of a psychotic break and ended up in an inpatient psychiatric facility, which led to more therapy and basically enforcing that there's something wrong with me and that I'm broken and that I'm crazy and that I can't be trusted. And so a few years later, I was kind of having a conversation with my dad and was talking about, I think I'm crazy. Why am I crazy? I don't understand. And my dad said, "You're not crazy. You're just complex." And that's a really big mind shift to have, to be able to look at the way your brain thinks and think of it in this way that's like, there's nothing wrong with me and the way that I interact with the world. I just need to learn and have the tools available to me to interact with the world in the way that feels comfortable for me. So yeah.
Cool. And then tell us a little bit about how this inspired Kamber, how your lived experience brought Kamber about.
Yeah. So when I was a teenager, I had really amazingly supportive parents who also didn't know what resources were available. I'm a big advocate for therapy, but going directly to therapy is not typically the route that people take, and especially teenagers who maybe don't have parents who are as supportive or parents who are as knowledgeable about the mental health realm and industry and what's available. And I felt like reflecting back, it's like if I had tools that were a little bit more accessible to me, that kind of gave me an introduction into understanding my mental health, even putting words around it. I can say now that I lived with anxiety and depression as a teenager, but I couldn't have said that then when I was a teenager. Right. I didn't have words like I feel triggered. I didn't have words like I'm feeling overstimulated. So being able to kind of educate and provide the context for what's going on in our brains, I think that would have been really helpful for me. And so with the technology that we now have access to, and obviously teens have a natural way with technology, it's how can we provide them with those resources and encourage them to seek out those resources and learn more, eventually leading them to therapy, but giving them a little bit of an in.
Yep. So we obviously at Pi thought this was an amazing idea from the get-go, but 6 to 8 weeks ago, everything changed. What have you been seeing in terms of your product, your business, since we've been dealing with these high stressors and anxiety of this situation we're all in?
Yeah, we're kind of in this position right now. So we just went live, the first version of our app. And we're now in this position where like, it's even more needed right now. People are feeling isolated and need access to tools that can help them not only feel grounded and like kind of get in touch with what's going on, but then also give them ideas for how they can break away from technology as well. But we're also struggling with like school, like our entire plan of who we were going to talk to about getting this into the hands of teenagers. Like schools are closed, you know, therapists are seeing clients virtually, but it's like the access to the people that we needed to talk to, it's just not as available right now. And so we're like, hi, we have this thing that we want to get out there, and we're not really sure how to do that in the world that we're living in at the moment.
Well, and I would assume there's also this additional feeling of pressure on you because you recognize the value of the tool and that it needs to be in people's hands, perhaps now more than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And also being in a position where like this is the first version that we created, and we want to get it into the hands of teens as soon as possible, while also knowing that we still have a lot to do. Like we need to get it out there to get feedback, to make changes, to get it out there again. So it's like, how do we accelerate that process?
I want to change gears just a little bit, because one of the questions we often get is about being a non-technical founder and finding a co-founder. Can you talk maybe a little bit about the makeup of your team and who you're working with to build this product?
Yeah, so my co-founder is Ron Sparks, and we it was very serendipitous and beautiful the way that he became my co-founder. I remember during that time, or maybe a little bit after I first met him, having a conversation with someone and like, should I go on, startup boards? Should I try to find a co-founder that way? But Ron actually came on as a pretty casual advisor to start. And we just kind of started working together in like a brainstorming, like I would bounce things off of him. We would have meetings every now and then. And then, I don't know, 4 or 5 months into that, he came on as an official advisor, and he helped us we actually built our journey. We went through a lot of circles, but we built a first version of the app in 2019. And so he helped us build that. And then we scrapped that and kind of started over and went the teen direction. It's a whole thing. So he helped us through that, or helped me through that process. And then at the end of that, I was thinking like, oh man, am I going to lose Ron? I don't really know what happens next. And then he approached me and was like, hey, I'm really enjoying this partnership and I really want to be a part of this team. And I think that we could make this happen. And so we just, over time, just started working closer and closer. And then he came on officially, and I'm really grateful to have him, because he's technical, which is helpful for my brain. And then there's also like, it's easy because it's like, I have this vision and he supports my vision, and he has a passion for compassion and like creating compassionate technological digital experiences. And so the two overlap really well. And yeah, we work really hard to make sure that we're super honest with each other. We have really strong communication. We have really difficult conversations sometimes and navigate those really well. So yeah.
That's great. You talked about, you kind of have version 1 out now. What is the broader vision for Kamber? Where would you like it to go?
Yeah. So the way that we're thinking about it right now is we'd like to, so we want to create this version, and this version will always be free. So we want to have teens have access to mental health resources regardless of their income, where they are. So that would always be available for free. And then collaborating with and partnering with mental health organizations, boarding schools, private schools, and ideally public schools as well, to create an integrated mental health platform that supports teens and then supports supports teachers, parents, and mental health professionals, so that you kind of create this support system. So that teachers are given resources for how do you support teens who have test anxiety? How do you support teens who learn a little bit differently? And then teens have resources that can support them while they're going through school. And then on the mental health side, having resources available to teens when they're not just in therapy. Beyond that, we want to create after school programs for teenagers, and ideally even K through 5th grade. Starting a little bit younger, we want to create summer camps, we want events, big. And I'm constantly coming up with new ideas. I get put in the parking lot. I'm like, this thing.
Put that over there. Obviously, I was a teenager a lot longer ago than you were, but it seems to me in talking to teens these days that there's a lot more willingness to talk about these issues and kind of be vocal about these issues. Do you think that, am I making a correct assumption, or is that just something I'm perceiving? Is it still kind of taboo to talk about this stuff?
I do. I think it is. And also I have talked to some teenagers about how there's still some, because people are talking about it, other teenagers are making fun of it. Like teenagers tend to do. Not all teenagers, obviously, but it's like, it gets turned into making fun of people for the mental health challenges that they're facing. And I think that even though we're talking about it, I think that there are a lot of really good resources, in-person resources that are available, but teens don't necessarily know how to access them. So I think we're talking about it, and now we need to meet there with the tools that we provide. So it's like, yes, like, identify that you have depression. That's amazing. Let's do that. And now let's like build your little toolkit. Yep.
I think it's super interesting to me because it's like entered the popular lexicon, but I don't know that there's any necessarily that depth you're talking about, or anything to kind of back up that lexicon or support people in working through those issues, which is what's super interesting to me about Kamber. Well, and you were originally focused on teenage girls, right? Like you've kind of expanded it to teens in general now?
Yeah.
And what was the reasoning for that decision?
Yeah, so we were originally focused on teen women specifically because I am a woman, I identify as a woman, and that's the experience that I know, and it was the experience that I felt that I could develop the most resources and like connect the most with to start. But we always had the intention of expanding. As we continued, I don't want anyone to feel like they don't fit somewhere. So I want transgender women, I want women, cis women, and I want people who are non-binary, I want men, I want transgender men. Like I want everyone to feel like, if I didn't want someone who's non-binary to come to our app and be like, I don't know if I fit here. I don't know if I can use this. So it just felt we want it to be inclusive, and we want to create a safe space. And then we want to be able to create programming and resources within that space that are directly like, I am a woman, I am non-binary, I am trans, and be able to create resources and bring in people that can help create those resources for specific groups.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's get in. We've got some questions. And if you have questions, folks, just use the Ask a Question button down at the bottom, and you can submit questions for McKenna. You can also upvote questions. So if you see something in there that you'd like us to focus on, please consider upvoting it. let's get started with this first question. Do you have any suggestions on how to get young people who would benefit from Kamber but might resist or resent the nudge to use it coming from their parent?
Ooh, that is a great question. I think, wow, that is a really great question that I have to think about for a second. I think being able to maybe start pointing them in the direction of maybe Kamber's social media to start, or other mental health influencers, or approaching it with compassion and approaching it in a way that's like, hey, I heard of this really cool app that I think you might be interested in. Just making sure that they feel safe and held in that conversation. Mm-hmm. If they have someone that they look up to that could maybe be a part of that conversation, that's maybe not a family member or maybe an older sibling. I don't have a very specific answer for that, and we'll have to think about that.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think it's just one of those, my parent told me I should use this, therefore I'm going to resist the urge to use it. Whereas if maybe a professional or your therapist or counselor mentions it, then there's a higher likelihood to adopt it, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next question, where did the name Kamber come from? And I think it's important for folks to know that this was a rename of an existing company, but where'd you come up with Kamber?
Yeah, so we used to be called Mandala Mission. We renamed it in January. We went through a whole naming process. My brother helped. He is an incredible digital strategist and brand strategist. And so the whole idea about Kamber is that we kind of help you navigate where you're going. So the word Kamber, spelled with a C, is kind of the slight bend in a road. So the idea is that we kind of help you get to where you're going in a different way, but without changing your direction entirely. And we added the K because I just wanted it to be a little bit cooler. And I just like the letter K.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's awesome. Do you, and we touched on this a little bit, but maybe to dive a little deeper, do you have a plan for addressing stigmas related to mental health and kind of helping people with that kind of thing?
I think that just education, just creating education, showing up on social media, showing up and bringing in influencers and bringing in people to talk about just changing the conversation around mental health. Mm-hmm. And getting people who teens look up to be changing the conversation about mental health. I think that that's ultimately the best thing that we can do. I think that if you open the door for people to share their experience, that they typically want that space to be able to do it. And so if you provide a safe space and show that it's okay, and that talking about these things is okay, that people usually want to meet you there.
That kind of sparks for me. It's only recently that startup founders have started talking about the mental and kind of behavioral strain of being a founder. Have you found yourself struggling with additional stressors, or do you feel well equipped from your prior lived experience to better deal with some of the stress of being a founder?
Oh, I definitely deal with my own mental health difficulties being a founder, especially because, so I have mood instability. So I struggle with kind of a constant up and down, which is why it's like I talk about I have depressive episodes, because I don't live in depression for extended periods of time, because I'm kind of on this roller coaster in my entire life. Since acknowledging that has been learning how to kind of level out that roller coaster. Mm-hmm. And so being a founder, is a roller coaster. So it's like you're adding more roller coaster into the already roller coaster that is my experience. But I have an extensive collection of tools that I can turn to, and I am constantly working on giving myself the space to, sorry, I'm looking at some of the double roller coaster. And I learned to give myself the space to be on that roller coaster. So, and I think that there's this misconception about mental health, not particularly from your question, but like just in general, that it's like when you do your mental health work, you suddenly land somewhere, like, and then you're fixed. And I think it's just, you just get more comfortable and more accepting and loving and like compassionate for yourself for living in whatever mental health experience you're living in and valuing yourself for it. So for me, that's the roller coaster. For somebody else, it might be OCD. It's like you learn tools to navigate it. You learn tools to accept yourself for it. And you learn how to live in this world, but you're not just all of a sudden, and I'm better now. Right.
It's a tool set for managing.
Right. Which is what makes it so beautiful, I think, in my opinion. Sorry, I'm very handsy.
And not to put you on the spot, I know we're close enough that you will answer this honestly. Did the Accelerator process of your experience, did it help mitigate that, or is that a triple roller coaster when you're a founder going through an accelerator?
It did help mitigate it. Being surrounded by other people who are also on the roller coaster is incredibly helpful. And that is not something that I was experiencing. So I just moved to Portland in November, and I lived in Bend previously, and Bend is great, but it not having that community of founders to like you can go to and you're like, I'm gonna rip my hair out, I'm on the low on the roller coaster, and they're like, I know, I get it. And I think just having that community and being able to relate to people, and then being able to go to you or to Marquita and say, I'm having this challenge and I don't know what direction I'm supposed to go, and being even just like, here's like a breadcrumb, and you're like, yes. Just feeling supported is
cool.
Cute.
Good. That's good to hear, because I think for a time, admittedly, we were, for lack of a better term, introducing stress for the sake of introducing stress, right? Like we were trying to accelerate companies in a way that wasn't terribly healthy. And so a lot of our work and a lot of Marquita's work at Pi has been trying to make it a more healthy, supportive environment. So that's super good to hear. This kind of pegs on to that one. How difficult is it to manage your own mental health while building a company that addresses mental health? Is it easier, harder, both?
I would say it's both. Like, it's easier in some ways because you're constantly being reminded of the ways that you need to be taking care of yourself. So like by building a platform for teens that like has these exercises and resources, and then I'm like, my anxiety's fully out of control and I'm like not listening to the exercises that I created in this app. And at the same time, it's hard because it's like you want to create something that's so like, I mean, this is like my heart, and so this is everything to me. Like, this is the only reason I'm starting a company is because of this, what I want to do here. And so there's a lot of pressure that I can put on myself, whether that's delivering something when I want it to be delivered, and or moving forward and not knowing how to move forward because you don't know 75% of the things that you're supposed to be doing most of the time. And so that can be really stressful, but yeah, I'd definitely say it's a little bit of both.
Okay, thank you. What are you first most excited about, And then second, most challenged by right now.
In general or with the business?
Maybe both, in general and with the business.
Well, since everything's been canceled, I'm most excited for nothing. No. So with Kamber, I think what I'm most excited about is having something that we can get out there and starting to get feedback, which is a little bit nerve-wracking. It's nerve-wracking putting something that you love out into the universe and saying, tell me everything that's wrong with it. But it's also the thing I'm most excited about, because we're not going to be able to build ultimately what teens are really going to use and engage with unless they tell us what they don't like about what we've already built. What I'm feeling most challenged by is finding those teenagers. Like, finding teens and connecting with mental health professionals and teachers is something that we really need to be doing right now. And I'm feeling a little bit like I don't, because it's hard to, it's like you can reach out and say to friends or post on Facebook and be like, hey, I'm looking for teenagers to test this. But then you're going through a parent to get to those teens. And then we're not just looking for teens. Like, we're not just looking for all of the teens in all of the world. Like, we're looking for teens who are living with anxiety, depression, bipolar, eating disorders. Like, we're looking for those teens. Like, we want to talk to those teens. And so, and that gets vulnerable, and that gets hard and challenging. And so navigating where we actually find those groups and how we connect with those groups has been difficult over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. What are some of the surprising things you've learned about the current state of mental health since starting this venture?
I've learned that 20 million teenagers live with a mental health challenge, and there's only 42 million teenagers in the United States, which is a pretty staggering statistic. I have learned that, man, these are the tough questions.
I know, they're throwing you hardballs. I can't control it. They're getting upvoted, so I have to ask you. I joke. I'm kind of like Anchorman. I just read anything that comes on to the question queue. I can't help it.
What are some of the surprising things I've learned?
Maybe I can feed you a little bit here. Like, what if this is the situation we're dealing with, and there's this massive population that's struggling without this tool set? Why has it taken so long to equip teens with the tools they need? Why do you think there's not already, like, you talk about kind of like diet apps or kind of workout apps or those kind of things exist, but there's not a preponderance of mental health apps for teens.
I think that something that does surprise me is how little parents know about their kids' experience and what they're going through. And I think that that's a big reason why. I think that we chalk a lot of mental health challenges in teens up to teens being moody teens. And it's like, oh, they're just a teenager. Oh, it's just nothing. But if you think back to your teenage experience, like, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, like, that is the most intense time of our lives. Like, if you think about teen love, like, and what that does to your heart, like, and parents will be like, oh, you'll get over it. You're just a teenager. And so I don't think that we take teens as seriously as we need to be taking them in terms of their mental health and how they're navigating that. And I also think it's not something, there's a lot of misconception around, depression, anxiety, that like depression looks a specific way. Like, depression is you're in bed, you can't shower, you can't get out of bed, and you don't do anything all day. And that's not what my depression looks like. Like, I get out of bed, I shower every day, and yet I have high functioning depression. And so I think that's a fundamental difference between the hyper focus that we have on the physical aspects of ourselves and versus the mental. Is that like it doesn't manifest in this way that you can see it and you're like, oh, like I need to do something about this. And and because we don't provide the spaces to talk about it, we just internalize and we end up thinking like we're crazy.
Yeah, well, and I think there's also the issue of, teenagers today have had access to all the information in the world at their fingertips for their entire lives, and they're dealing with an entirely different situation than what many of us experienced as teenagers. And so I think it's really, it's in one sense difficult to empathize, and also perhaps far too easy to kind of romanticize the teen experience, kind of like you talked about, like, oh, I went through this as a teenager, you're just going through a phase kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which can be challenging. Okay, another question. Do you have any nutrition tips for how to deal with depression? So you and I have talked before about, there's not always a medication that solves this problem. What are other ways to equip people to cope and manage?
Yeah. If my sister-in-law is watching, she's probably laughing right now because she's a dietitian and I'm constantly asking her questions about nutrition because it's probably my biggest downfall. I'm constantly learning about nutrition. But if I can echo the things that she has told me, it's to eat the rainbow. And not Skittles though, but like to balance your diet with all of the colors of the rainbow, right? And so putting food in your body that feels good, and she talks about mindful eating, so focusing on food that makes you feel good while using like what feels good in the moment and what does your body need. And then you can Google brain foods, which is something I've done. If you need Google tips for nutrition, I got that on lock.
That's awesome. Okay, here we got another one. While perhaps at the upper range of teens, do you have any predictions about how the impact of more recent graduates taking a gap year rather than going through new online-only university might impact their own personal development and growth? Being a self-sufficient freshman at a university away from home requires a certain evolution. A gap year at home may not. So do you foresee any impact from an emotional or behavioral standpoint for these folks going through this situation?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. But yeah, I mean, I think that the experience that you have getting out into the world, I mean, you're pretty much shifting and changing the entire experience that you're expecting to have if you were expecting to go to college and to be a college freshman and to live in a dorm. And I think that will have tremendous mental health impacts in I think this being this feeling like you're behind or that you're not where you're supposed to be and that there's nothing that you can do about it, even though this happening doesn't necessarily mean that you are behind. But I think that there's a lot of the mental gymnastics that will be happening around failed expectations and coping with that.
Right, and that it's a situation that is completely out of your control at a time in your life when you're feeling like you're starting to take on more of that maturity and control.
Right, absolutely.
Well, McKenna, we made it through all of the audience questions. Thank you for everyone for submitting those. And so now is the time when we kind of turn the tables and ask you, McKenna, what can we as a community be doing to help you and Kamber? How can we be most helpful right now?
Yeah, I think I've said it a few times throughout, but we're really looking for testers right now. And so we're looking for teenagers who would be interested in not only testing, but then providing us with feedback, whether that's through interviews or Marco Polo or through the app itself. There's actually a link on the app. If you go to camberhealth.com, you can find information about how to get the app on your phone. It's actually web-based right now, so you can kind of download it to if you have an iPhone, you can save it to your home screen. It'll function exactly like an app. And then connecting with mental health professionals and teachers. If anyone knows any therapists or teachers, that would be really helpful for us too, because we're starting to incorporate them and we want them to be looking at the app so that we have both sides. Like we have the teens that are like, this is how we want it to function. This is how we want it to work. And then we have mental health professionals who are helping support us to make that happen with the information and tools that the teens need.
Awesome. Thank you. And then there was could there be an integration? We had Carthy on a little while ago. And so could there be an integration between Golden Hour and Kamber Health delivering mental health content as students learn to be more productive and intentional about life?
Yes.
We always like those kind of pie combo things. That would be great.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
So we'll get you in the task shopping. What did she call that? It's like a marketplace for growth and goals.
Yes. Yes. I'm all about it.
Well, we really appreciate you spending time with us. Thanks so much for answering these questions.